Hi, welcome to Sacred Intelligence TV. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. There's a quote that says, "Be happy, not because everything is good, but because you can see the good in everything." And on today's show, we're really going to extend and talk a little bit about what does it mean to be happy and how do we get to this place of happiness? Because happiness is something that most people really strive for, long for much of their lives. And we long for happiness so much is the reason why we go crazy. For those of you who are a little bit older, you might remember Bobby McFerrin's song, "Don't Worry, Be Happy," and it was such a catchy little tune, and we loved that song. And then in recent years, we've heard Pharrell Williams' song, "Happy," and everybody has done a video about it, and you see people dancing about it because we really want to be happy. The problem is we have moments of happiness as opposed to working hard to be in this place of happiness. But you're in luck today because our guest today is Jan Hoath, who is the happiness heroine. And she is joining us today to tell us all about how she has an intention for being happy and how it helps her in her daily lives, not only her, but it helps her clients as well, and it helps leaders, and she'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But just to give you a little bit about Jan, Jan is the founder of Nurture the Leader Incorporated, and she is the creator of the Happiness Prism. I can't wait to hear more about that. And with this prism, when she'll talk a little bit about it, it's about helping you to find your ultimate happiness. And she lives in her absolute truth. She enjoys her family that she lives with. She has 2 children and a golden retriever and a dog as well. I didn't forget about the husband as well. But I do love children and pets. So, but at any rate, she is going to talk a little bit about her experiences, and she will talk about how she came to this place of making happiness her intent. I hope after today's show, you will be able to do the same thing. And if you would like to learn more about being happy, she's the perfect person for you to talk to, and you'll see why in a moment. So, Jan, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
And as always, Susan, I'm so delighted that she's with me as well, and we're ready to get started.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, Jan, I think the first thing that I would ask you about is this intention of being happy. What does that mean to set your intentions to be happy?
Yes, well, and I love that you asked this right off to get started. I do a lot of work around intention because it really sets a framework through which we view things and essentially everything. And obviously we'll be hearing more about my story, and I'll be sharing that today. But over the course of my life, I've realized that when we reset the framework really on any situation, it empowers us. And ultimately, I believe we are all here to lead and live happy lives. Mm-hmm. So when you come from that space, right away, it's a game changer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's so interesting that you say that we're all here to live happy lives, because that's a part of the work that we do with, just in particular with women. Mm-hmm. At some point, I just had this conversation yesterday with someone, at some point we sort of lose ourselves and we think my life is all about my children or my husband or my pet, whatever it is, my job, but it's really, I'm no longer a part of the equation. And I think it's at that point that they don't value themselves or see happiness as even possible.
Yes. And there's definitely that illusion. I know I end up talking about this a lot in the workshops that I do, that, you know, maybe happiness might seem kind of highfalutin in some ways, or like a far-fetched dream. And even we talk about it in our household with our children, that maybe you're not in we categorize it very simply, especially with young children. Not happy, peace, and then happy. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the work that I do sometimes, especially in the realm that you're talking about, and that's even essentially where my work came through so powerfully when I too was also feeling like happiness seemed so far away, that it was like, okay, well, what can I do to get to peace?
Mm-hmm. So that's great. So what you're actually saying is we take it in stages. It's not like we're going to go from not being happy till all of a sudden we're happy. It's like, okay, so what would be the next place? That's really critical, that peace part. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later, because I know that there'll be people out here saying, well, I'm stuck in this situation over here. I'm traumatized every day. How can I get to that place of happiness? So say a little bit more, though, about developing your happiness, and maybe you could talk a little bit even about your prism that you have, because that's ultimately what gets us to the happiness, right?
Yes, well, thank you. And it's so perfect that you led in today to talking about the song from Pharrell Williams, Happy, because that actually contributed to my really connecting with this concept, which I believe I was divinely guided to bring to the planet to really support people, because the happiness prism is a framework for people. And I hold my prism in front of my heart, because that's where this concept lives, is really over your heart. When you're heart-centered, and I know that's an up-and-coming and really becoming a mainstream word these days, of being heart-centered. But I was sitting in a situation where I was looking at my family, thinking about this dream that we have that just seems so out there, and our dream is to sail around the world. And here we're living in Connecticut. We're not living on a boat yet, and in fact, if by all stretches of the imagination, that seems so far away. And then when I started to really ask myself these questions, like, why do I want to live on a boat? Well, what does it do for me? And then at the end of the day, it was like, well, just thinking about living on a boat and taking my family around the world makes me happy. Just thinking about it. And then I kind of followed this thought stream that, we're creative thinkers, and everyone's had this experience where it was like, this led to that, and it, like, you connect these dots that if you had tried to map it out, you would never have been able to. So I followed the thread, and I got to a place of, well, I desire this happiness, and there's something more about me in this desire of happiness, and really communicating it with the world. Because I've always known in my heart that I had something to share with the world. And I wasn't sure what that was and exactly how to communicate it. And yet, as I started to look back over my life and my life challenges, I started to really realize, like, there's something around the idea of happiness prism. Because where the prism aspect comes in is that we as human beings are light beings. And I really truly believe whatever your values are spiritually, that we are light beings, and when we are in a good place, that light beams out on the world. And essentially it beams out on the world like a prism. A light through a prism causes a rainbow. And I was really sitting with this idea going, oh my gosh, like, wow, when I center myself around being happy, it's so much more than just about me. It's about my family getting to be happy. It's about my clients and the ripple effect. But then when I was really sitting with the idea of prism and everything else, I connected with this triangle and realized, well, there's 3 sides to the triangle. And when I went back and scanned over my life, there were 3 major turning points in my life in which I connected with these powerful concepts that I believe are the 3 aspects that we fundamentally as human beings require to nurture on a daily basis. And certainly very interested to hear from the clinical standpoint what your thoughts are, and I think this will be interesting for your viewers also to hear. But the three aspects are play, peace, and progress. And these concepts came to me at these very crucial moments in my life where I really had a choice. And talk about intention, I really had to sit down and go, whoa. And I don't know if now's the time to share those pieces, but yeah.
I do want you to share those pieces, but One of the things I'm thinking about as I hear you tell your story, and as you started out talking about this desire to travel around the world, I think you did a couple of things that we're often trying to encourage people to do, because we often try to help people find what their purpose is, how to get to this place of peace, even if we call it something different. But people don't want to go deep within, and they stop at the surface. So I heard you say, I thought about this, and then I went the next step, and I thought about this, and I followed the threads. You went deeper. And you had to allow yourself the opportunity to do that. And so that would be one of the things that I would say that I would want to encourage our viewers to do, is to go deeper. Don't just have a thought and then go to the next thing really quickly and forget about what that meaning is for you. Because you are important. Each of us is important. Yes. So if we don't think about that, and we only think about, well, we're never going to sell around the world. That's too far-fetched.
Yes.
But it does start with the intention. The other thing that I heard you say that was really important is about choice. We can choose. And I heard you say on another episode that I watched you on, talking about an event with your daughter, and where she didn't want to go to school. And you did this little play with her to really get her in the mood to go to school.
Yes.
And each and every day we can choose. Sometimes our kids will frustrate us, sometimes our partners or coworkers, or even we frustrate ourselves, but we can choose to get out of that mood. So I appreciate you really saying that. So talk a little bit about the 3 dimensions of the prism, and go into your play a little bit. Or whatever, whichever one.
Well, I have to laugh, because I always, this is such a gorgeous opportunity, and I just, want to take a moment now to really thank you, ladies, for inviting me onto the show. And as you were talking about, in every moment we have a choice, I have a live example that I experienced and encountered on the way here.
Okay.
Which is so funny, because I know another interview I was in, I talked about it. And I avoided an accident. I had a woman that literally cut me off, and I literally was within millimeters of hitting a pole.
Wow.
And honked my horn and took a deep breath and was like, whew. And I noticed about 50 feet up the road, she had stopped her car and was pulled over. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could have stepped on the gas and been upset.
Sure.
And frustrated, because she was clearly in the wrong around pulling out, and it was like she didn't see me. And I pulled up next to her, and I was like, I didn't say anything. She goes, I am so sorry. And I just looked at her and I said, I received that. And I said, that scared me. And she said, are you okay? That scared me too.
I was going to say, that probably scared her too. But, but think about what you just did in that moment. You changed the way you were feeling, and you changed, because if you didn't change your intention in that moment, you could have driven here and been angry. Not you, because you're the happiest.
No, you never get angry.
But other people would have driven, and then you carry it with you for a long time, and now it impacts the rest of your time. So say, for instance, if you didn't change your intent, you would have come here, been thrown off your game, and then what? Not only would it impact just the interview here, but the viewers.
Yeah,
so
I was really, as you know, I am committed to being the space of what I preach. But I took a point to turn back at her and say, I do not hold any resentment towards you. I just want you to know I really receive your apology and appreciate you taking a moment to stop and apologize.
I think it also speaks to, we often experience situations and we ascribe a meaning to it that's not there. She didn't see you.
She didn't see me.
But some people would curse and give her the bird and do all of these other things, and she didn't. We can all make that mistake. So
and interesting. I think it's interesting to talk about it just in such simple terms like traffic, right? Or somebody cutting you off, and that's an example that I use with my clients all the time. I say, okay, so what is it that we do if somebody say we're sort of okay, so we're a little liberally, you know, and not so into like huge SUVs that are gas guzzlers or whatever. You know, they're whatever our, you know, issues are around, okay, we're worrying about the environment or whatever. But so somebody comes up in this huge SUV and cuts you off. And let's be honest, usually people will not pull over to apologize when that happens.
I know, I was grateful for the opportunity for that interaction.
Yeah, exactly. That's, so you made that choice, but she did too. She made the choice to stop. And that doesn't always happen. So exactly what Carolyn was saying about we you know, get all, you know, oh, that, you know, jerk probably thinks he owns the road, and, you know, and we get these thoughts going in our minds that get us upset. And it's not that the person cut us off that upsets us. It's what we're thinking about it that gets us upset. And so my point is always, okay, the best thing in that situation is not to make any assumptions, but if you're going to make assumptions, why is it that we choose to make assumptions that make us unhappy, rather than saying, you know, maybe that guy has a sick child in the back seat and he's in way more of a hurry than I am, and is a little distracted because he's worried about his child. We don't know. You know, so why is it that when we have that choice, it is a choice? What are we going to assume? But and where does that put us?
I think one of the things in this discussion, though, is the fact of the matter is, you know what? Sometimes people are just being a jerk, and sometimes bad stuff is just going to happen to you. So then we still choose.
And it is a choice, even when we don't like the choices. It might be black and gray are the choices. It might not be
exactly
rainbows and black. It's understanding that in every moment we have a choice, and recognizing that that choice has a ripple effect.
Exactly.
And I know
sometimes I'm thinking about that choice is really a matter of accepting what just happened. Accepting the fact that, yes, she did cut me off. Or accepting the fact that, yes, my situation in life right now might be pretty darn bad. I can accept that, and once I accept that, then it gives me the freedom to choose what I will do. It will help me problem solve, really. Because if we spin our wheels just thinking about all the negatives that are associated with it, all the sadness and all the trauma associated with it, then it doesn't open the door for us to be able to think outside of the box in terms of solving our problems and getting to that place of peace, if nothing else. But we do want to hear about your
Prism.
Your Prism.
Yes.
So because we're so excited we keep talking about it, but we want to make sure that you describe that and tell us how you got to that place.
Absolutely, thank you. And yes, but I was just feeling called to share that bit because it was obviously a very powerful, visceral experience that I had on the way here, and I actually got to, you know, witness her face and like almost the relief that she had that I received it so calmly.
Yes.
And I know I got to have an impact on her as well. That there's, I mean, I realize when I respond that way, it gives hope to other people that, like, look, I screwed up, you know, and what is possible when we're willing to forgive.
Sure.
So, yeah. This is awesome. So going into my story, the story begins, at least for the purpose of the Prism, as far as one of the 3 major turning points in my life was when I was 16 and I was diagnosed with depression. I was taking medication, antidepressants, to assist me in that process. And I actually hadn't shared this before, but I feel called to share it now. I was being bullied at school as well. And I had, life was just really not in a good way for me. And yet I had a seed of hope, you know. I had this huge smile, and I had this huge smile in my heart, but was not getting it out, if you will. And I was sitting in German class, and I had a German substitute teacher who saw something in me. And she said, "Hey, I think you ought to try out for this scholarship. And it was to go overseas for a year as an exchange student. And I had nothing else to do. And I just literally poured my heart into the application. And the next thing you know, we get a letter and we get a call. We want you to come to the interview. And lo and behold, I win a scholarship to go to Germany for a year as an exchange student, as a 16-year-old. This is before internet, phone bill. You know, it's like $1 plus a minute. We're
that
really
was
tough.
I think that's pretty courageous of you, quite frankly.
Yeah.
To even want to go to Germany for a year at 16.
There was, and I think that's where the seed was planted for when I really connected with the idea of play. Because it excited me so much, just the thought. Mm-hmm. You know, even just talking about like the sailing. I haven't done it yet, and yet just the thought when I was filling out that application, the thought of getting to go far away from everything that I knew, to go explore a foreign country with foreign people and amazing food and experiences that I had never had before, that truly planted the seed and ignited the consideration of a playful future. And that's where I really connected with the power of play and how important that is, not only in my life, but I truly believe in everyone's lives. I mean, there's so many, we're dealing with preschool and early elementary years with my children, and all this conversation around play in the educational system is so powerful.
Sure.
It doesn't end. It doesn't end with school years. Yeah. So I went to Germany, and yet before we signed the paper and put me on the plane, my parents sat me down and said, the minute they find out you're on antidepressants, they're not going to want to send you overseas to live far away from everything you know, comfort and everything else. And I really did some soul searching and thought, I can choose depression and stay here in a situation that doesn't feel good at all, or I can choose adventure. And I essentially healed myself to the extent of not requiring antidepressants. And I have stayed committed to that realm and have not required antidepressants since.
And you and I talked.
Yeah, I know there's a clinical...
Because I want to be very clear to our viewers out there that worked for Jan, the method that she chose. And I do believe that there's a certain healing, that we contribute to our own healing. But there are some people who do need antidepressants, and some people can have antidepressants and they could go to Germany and they would be just fine. But at 16, I think that you know, it's compounded. You're sending a teenager off for a year, and then from everything you know, of course, that sounds like sound advice. But we do just want to be clear that there are some people who require antidepressants, and this worked for you and for many others because, of course, as cognitive behavioral therapists, we believe in mind over mood to the extent that people are able to do the work. And also Louise Hay, I don't know if you're familiar with her, with You Can Heal Your Life, talks about as well as being able to change our cognitions and contribute to our healing. But it sounds fascinating to have that opportunity. I mean, so many things came up for me when you were saying that, one of which, do you speak fluent German now?
Yes,
okay.
I'm fluent in German. I speak German with my children. We still have contact with my original host family.
Great.
Two of my German sisters have joined me. They came to my wedding. They came to my sister's weddings. So we have an integrated family.
So do you see now what one choice
Correct.
can do?
Yeah.
The other thing that came up, and this is probably a conversation to have offline more, but you talked about being bullied. And I'm thinking about if more kids and more people were happy, or happier,
or at least at peace.
At least at peace, there would be less bullying. So there might be a place to go into the school systems and, you know, talk about that to some extent. But again, that's just kind of throwing that out there because I mean, bullying is such a serious issue, and you know, any way that we can combat bullying would be great. But we better let you explain your other two pieces of the Prism there, because we'll run out of time before we know it.
And I would also like to know, though, before we move away from play,
Yes.
because I understand the choice that you made. Okay, I can stay in this difficult and painful situation, or I can choose adventure. And I understand, you know, that play and adventure, and this was your choice to, okay, I'm not going to necessarily spend junior year completely dedicated to my academics so that I can, you know, some people do that. You chose an adventure, and it's not that you weren't learning while you were there. Obviously you did. I did the same thing at 17, went to Japan. Unfortunately, I'm not fluent in Japanese anymore, but I never was. But anyway, but I think I would like to know a little bit more about how, okay, so at 16 doing that adventure, that's play. How does it manifest in your adult life? Because I think a lot of us, we have this little vicarious situation going on with our children where we buy toys for them that they don't necessarily want, but we want to play with. But, you know, we can't just go and buy them for ourselves, right? I mean, of course we can, but, you know, most people wouldn't. And, you know, or go to a Disney movie. So you know, okay, well, I better, you know, find a kid to go with, because otherwise I'm going to look ridiculous sitting in a Disney movie by myself. So how do you see, or how do you help people to move into that in a way that's comfortable and I think also usually relaxing? A lot of times play can really be a huge stress reliever.
Yes.
So what does that look like for you and for some of your clients?
Yes, well, and I love that you did bring that up, because at 16, there's nothing more playful than I could have imagined than to go far away, to live, you know, in a foreign country and Europe and, right, you know, just like, woo. Play is individual. It's personal. And it doesn't have to mean childlike play. So in my workshops with my clients, I really work with people to connect with what their play is. And play might be reading a book. Play might be going to a meditation retreat. Play might be going to a Disney film and saying, hey, I want to do that for me. In fact, I will share this morning, my play was I jumped in the pool at where we live. We have a pool. And I wasn't with the kids. And I did a massive cannonball. And I was so proud of it. And I laughed. And obviously, this is the work that I do. I must stand for it. And yet that was my connection with play this morning. And that's something that I will talk about here at the end. But what I really invite people to do is connect with each aspect of their happiness prism on a daily basis, even if it's one tiny little act. And it might be dancing, and it might be having a coffee with a friend. It might be just picking up the phone and talking to someone. But to connect with playful energy and looking at what action may I take in my life, whether it's a little action today or a big action in the next year or 5 years, what is it that will have you connect with the playful energies?
But I think, Jan, the problem is, and this has been my experience with the work that I do, is people forget what makes them happy. Often in my retreats, I'll just ask a simple question, what makes you happy? Or I gave someone that assignment yesterday to come back next week, what makes you happy? And I don't know. And you know, you have to know what brings you joy. And it could be the simple things. It could be something like just laughing. There's some people who've lost laughter in their lives. And if you've ever done yoga, sometimes the yoga instructor that I used to go to would just have us just to laugh. And it sounds kind of funny at first because it doesn't feel authentic, but then if you start laughing, really you'll start thinking of things to really laugh about, and you just feel so good with it. I know for me, one of the things I like to do in terms of play, I love singing. I don't profess to be a singer, but I love singing, and I love the sound of music. So sometimes I'll just break out in the sound of music, even with my godchild and with my children, and my kids absolutely hate when I sing in the store, you know, but my godchild is okay with it. I can be with her, and we'll blast. We'll roll the windows down and we'll blast the sound of music. Like, yeah, we're singing the sound of music. But just to go back to those places, to what you really love, to let your hair down, so to speak. So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So then, what's your next one though?
So the next powerful turning point in my life that I really connected with something majorly important, as far as I'm concerned, was fast forward in my life. I'm happily married. My husband is Australian, actually, and I know it kind of came up in the conversation around play and the repercussions of the one choice and how that
effect, yep.
Correct, that at 16 I would go to Germany, and then in my 20s I would go to Australia and meet my husband, who is Australian.
Yes.
So I'm married to this amazing Australian man. I'm so in love with him. He's awesome. And his parents are over visiting us, and we were visiting, actually all of us are visiting my parents in the Keys, the Florida Keys, where there's a 1-lane or 2-lane highway, and it's a holiday weekend, and it's really busy traffic-wise, and I love my in-laws, really blessed with amazing in-laws, and they decide that it would be a great idea to just go on a bike ride alone, you know, and we certainly honor that, to go have time with one another. And yet an hour later we got a phone call, and my mother-in-law looked the wrong way. Being Australian, she looked the wrong way on the street, and she was tragically struck and killed by a car. Yeah, and obviously a shock, and yet, you know, in that time, and just they had only been visiting a few days, and yet she had already had a massive impact on that community. She was all over the national news in Australia. She was all over the local paper, and it was only in her passing that we realized that she still suffered from depression, and yet she didn't realize what a positive impact she had on people. And of course, whenever tragic strikes, or tragedy strikes, we recognize that there's, you know, life is short. And yet in this specific moment, I really connected with the importance of progress, and really connected with what I desire deeply in life, and that was to have a massive impact on people. And yet I didn't know what that looked like at the time. You know, here it's nearly 10 years later, and I'm here on your show talking about this.
So can you just draw that out a little bit more? You said you connected with progress, and what about that made you think of progress? You know, was it your mother-in-law's that she was moving forward, not moving forward? How did progress, that word,
how did the word really come through? It was the fact that she, I knew I had, if you will, some of the gifts that she had. To be able to listen to people, to love on them in a way that inspired them. And yet I knew I was not doing that.
Okay.
And then for her, and to witness the experience of how she interacted with people. It just, even to this day, anyone who knew her will say, yes, this woman had such a powerful impact on people, and she didn't realize it. And for me, it was like, well, she left us in what I believe the earth plane, and yet we're all still here. And each one of us has a unique role in this game of life. And when I sat with that and realized what that meant for me, it was like, hang on, you know, there's some progress I've got to make while I'm still here. I don't know when my end of the line is. You know, we all don't know the end of our lines. And yet, I know that when I wake up to make progress in my life, tiny baby steps, whatever it is, that was the turning point for me to suddenly get on with my desire to coach people, get on with my desire to share more of my gifts of interacting with people, and to get on with my life and realize that the more that I supported others in recognizing what their next step is and what their next step is, i.e. progress, that it assisted and connecting more deeply with happiness.
And I think what's critical about what you're saying, it gets back to the quote that I said earlier in terms of happiness. It's not that every situation is a happy situation,
Yes.
but you really can see something powerful and positive coming out of the
Yes.
situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yes.
been said in lots of different ways,
Yep.
but because I can think of other quotes I've heard or scriptures I've heard that really talk about bringing something good out of a negative, difficult,
Yes.
traumatizing situation. And what I appreciate about this discussion is because, you know, I'm sure that there are viewers who are looking and thinking, you know, my life stinks. I can't be happy in this
Yes.
situation. And what you're saying is, I've had some situations
Mm-hmm.
that have been difficult because
Mm-hmm.
clinical depression is not easy. Your loved one being, you know, hit, you know, I guess by a vehicle, that is horrible. It's
Mm-hmm.
horrible. I could feel it as you were telling us what happened, and
Yes.
I knew what had happened, but it was like
To hear it again.
hearing it again.
Yeah.
And so you lived that experience. That could not have been easy for you or your husband because grief is difficult. But what you're saying
Yes.
is we have to keep moving. You don't
Yes.
stay in that same place.
Yes.
You keep moving. And so what you've done is you found a way that you put play and progress together, and that's a part of your Prism. Although I think progress is down here,
Progress
right?
is on the bottom, this is the base, yes.
So progress is the base, but then, so now what about this third piece then that's going to
Yes.
bring us into that place? Because what I want our viewers to know when they're listening to you
Yes.
is that this takes work. It's not like you're
Yes.
saying, oh yes, I'm just happy.
Yes,
And
it's not a
It takes a lot of
whimsical.
work to do this. You have to choose to do it.
Yes.
And you have to have commitment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about the third.
Yes. Okay. So the third aspect is came a few years later. Fast forward, I have two beautiful children, a 2-year-old and a 6-week-old. And I'm changing his little onesie and notice something's not right with his arm. It's quite swollen, or it's actually solid. It's just something's not right. So we either call the doctor, go to the doctor, they send us to the emergency room for x-rays, and then they send us to up the road to a children's hospital. And 8 hours later, I'm sitting in the oncology ward with my then 6-week-old son. My husband's home with the 2-year-old, and I'm alone in the dark with this beautiful baby boy with wires coming out of him every which way, and they don't know what it is. But within his arm, his bone is destroyed. There's no sign of a fracture. They don't know if it's an infection. They don't know if it's cancer. They don't know what it is, but they suspect it's life-threatening. And here we are, you're in the oncology ward for further notice, until further notice. And it was there in the darkness of this.
Did you say a year? What did you just say? That you were...
Until further notice. We
okay.
don't know.
Okay.
We
I
don't
thought I heard
know.
okay.
So at this point, you're being admitted to the oncology wing of this children's hospital while we do
Try
some
and figure it
testing and
out,
figure
yeah.
out what's going on. Meanwhile, the arm is getting bigger and more swollen. And it was in that space that I just sat there and I looked at him and I just took a deep breath and I went, help. And it was the first time that I really looked up and I really connected with the fact that there are forces at work way beyond what any of us can imagine and way beyond whatever I was willing to understand or be open to. And that's when I connected with the power and the importance of peace. Because whatever spiritual beliefs anyone has, I believe that it is in a peaceful moment we connect
Sure.
with what that is. And in those peaceful moments, in the quiet times, and in between doctors and teams of doctors and every test that was possibly that they could have taken on him, I was connecting with peace. And 2 weeks later, we left the oncology ward with the medical diagnosis of a mystery and a pat on the back for best wishes And a year later, the doctor looked at his film and confirmed that it was a miracle. That there is no proof anything ever happened. That his bone perfectly grew back, and all we have of proof, besides the, you know, the pictures in the hospital and everything else, all we have is a little scar in his arm.
Yeah.
But the 6-week-old boy, who's now 3.5 years old,
Yes. Yes.
happy and vibrant and amazing,
Yeah.
that is a miracle.
Yes, it is.
And yet, I truly believed we healed him through our love, through the peace, and that it was a powerful moment in my life to recognize that there are much bigger forces at work. And I share this story in love and in truth and intention so that people understand that there are miracles, whether it's medical, financial, circumstantial, whatever it is, there are miracles. And we may have our miracle, but also just the simplicity and the power importance of peace, because I could not have handled that experience in the hospital if I hadn't taken the time to continue to connect with peace, to continue to connect with what I required just even in the moment.
Well, I think what you're saying is so important, because if we don't come to that place of peace and our emotions are all over the place, we don't make good decisions in that. So the doctor could have come in to talk to you about anything, and you wouldn't have even heard it, because most often when we have a diagnosis of something that's terminal, or that's considered terminal, or just, let's just say, cancer. When you hear cancer, you don't hear anything else after that.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
So what happens is you're in the oncology ward, and if you didn't come to that place, how would you ever hear what the doctor was saying?
And make
What
strategic
decisions-
and make
exactly.
the powerful decisions that are
Exactly.
required.
But I think what I appreciate about what you're saying, because it's what we talk about often, is this connection with the sacred, and whatever that is for people, just being able to just settle and connect. Doesn't mean that everything is going to be solved in one moment, because as you talk more and more about your coming to this place of developing your happiness prism, as you talk about that, underneath it I hear the work. So I do hope that our viewers aren't just hearing you got to this place and I'm just a happy person.
Yes.
No, you had a journey to get you there, and it didn't mean that each phase, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is what I'm hearing, each phase might have been a difficult phase, but it's what you were able to do once you came through those phases. Because while you're sitting at the hospital with your 6-month-old, you're not thinking about, oh, I have this happiness prism, or I'm going to develop this. That's not the point. The point is being in tune with what's happening to you at that moment in time, and then what do we do with it after everything is over, or even while.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's interesting that you say this, and it's absolutely true. It takes effort. It takes, and that's where it is kind of like a constant nurturing of the different aspects. Because even when I reflect back, before I had connected with the idea of the happiness prism, I recognized that there were moments in the hospital that I really did take the time to connect with play. And I really did take the time to connect with progress, because all of those pieces were required for me to stay centered and to be able to powerfully deal with the situation. Like, I don't know if it's still on my website, but I even wrote a blog about Fruit Loops.
Yes.
And how just for me one day, that was the joy, was to get to order Fruit Loops. Because especially with a 6-week-old child, and my heart really goes out to any families who have faced or are facing the experience of having a child hospitalized, you can't leave them. For me to take a shower, I had to have a nurse come in and sit with my son so I could just go take a shower. So I'm sitting in the hospital room ordering food, and it was like, something healthy, Fruit Loops. There's nothing more joyful than I can imagine in this moment to have Fruit Loops, and that was playful. And I really connected with play, even though I wasn't aware that's what I was doing. And yet I was already honoring subconsciously these aspects. And absolutely, like I had to follow through on that intuitive idea of, why don't I eat Fruit Loops? And that would bring me joy.
But what I think is so amazing about what you're talking about is that we all have a purpose.
Yes.
And I think that in whatever work we're doing, we come to this point where we're able to reflect back and we're able to look at situations that have happened in life. And our steps have been ordered the whole time. You know, I'm not saying that everything that happens to us had to happen. I don't. Some people will say that. I believe that everything happened to me, I had to. You know, I don't think for every situation. Some things we could live without, and we could still get to the same. We could still get to the same point.
Yes.
But my point is that maybe it was designed for you to be the person to talk about the happiness prism, and you would have come to it some way or other in your life. But it's the ability to reflect on the experiences that we have, and that's what you've done.
Yes.
You've reflected on, what did I get in this moment?
Yes.
What are the consistencies? What are the patterns that I see over and over and over again? It's just like, for me, I focus a lot on relationships, and primarily I talk a lot about, you know, our sacred, selfish, and shared relationships. But when I look back over my life, that theme of relationships, it's always been there. So I think that I want to encourage our viewers to be able to take a look at what's your purpose, what are you called for, and get you to that place of happiness, because once you find your purpose in life, you're going to find happiness, no doubt. But what I want to do, because again, I feel like there's so many things we could have asked you about, and our time is going to run out really soon, but nurture the leader. Can you say a little bit more about that and what it is that you do, and who do you consider leaders? Because I'm sure you're not just talking about the CEO of a company, but how do you begin to nurture the leaders? Who are the leaders? All those questions. So as much as you can share with us about that.
Absolutely, yes, and there is a tie here, right, between the happiness and the leadership, because what I believe is each one of us is a leader. And when we take ownership of that whether we are a leader of 1 or 1,001, when we take ownership of being the leader of our lives in every moment, it shifts everything. Just like I had to experience a whole different realm of leadership in standing for my son in the hospital. The concept of leadership, I've always been drawn to the word leader, and yet I wasn't, like you said, you know, we have these themes in our life that just suddenly finally make sense at some point, but I've always known that I desired to be a leader, and I desired to support other leaders, because when we take ownership of the idea of being a leader, it's acknowledging the fact that we actually care that much more about ourselves and the impact we're having. Whether it's conscious or unconscious. But whether we're the leader of our family or just our own life, when we take that level of ownership, there's a whole different perspective, way of operating. And yet as leaders, and you even touched on this at the beginning of our conversation, that especially as women, we go into spaces in our life where we're taking care of everyone else, and we forget about taking care of ourselves, and that's where the whole concept of nurture the leader came in, because I realized I required more nurturing, and I realized so many other people required this message of nurturing the leader, and then really like nurturing the leader within us.
So that's beautiful. So what I hear you saying, because I know that you do individual work and group work, that anyone who wants to come and work with you, they can come and work with you, and you don't have to be at this place of trying to figure out your life and all of that. It's really about nurturing who you are in this time and space.
Correct.
That's great. And I know that you have a website, nurturetheleader.com, that people can visit, and you can, again, at the end, we want to make sure that people know how to contact you. But I think that that's just fascinating to help people to kind of figure out, how do you nurture yourself, you know, and nurturing myself so that I can get to that place of happiness.
Exactly, and that's where the happiness prism actually fits into this whole nurture the leader happiness prism model, is that it's through the happiness prism that you're nurtured. And that you essentially get to connect with what I call your happy truth, which is what I believe when we are connected and aligned with our intuition, which that's where the happiness prism comes in. It supports people in a framework that they fill in. You know, I'm not just going to give the answers, what's your play today? That's for you to come up with. But when people connect with their own intuition, that's where their happy truth comes in. And it's from that space that I believe we get to lead and live the best lives possible.
How do you help people tap into their intuition? We have ways that we're often talking to people about, you know, sitting in that space. But how can our viewers begin that process of just tapping into their intuition?
Yes. Well, I would invite them to draw a triangle on a piece of paper right now. This is what I do in my workshops. But this is the process. Super simple that people can take away with them. And if that's what they get from this opportunity, I really hope that they do and take it and own it. But draw a triangle and then ask yourself, who do I require to be in this moment to experience happiness?
I love that question. Who do I require to be in this moment to experience happiness?
And whatever comes up. Like when I was setting up, I create a prism. It's part of how I set an intention. But I created a prism before I came on the show. And who do I require to be happy in this moment? And it was me. That's what came through. And when I really own me, I mean, you can see it's like I'm radiating as I say it because it's my truth. That's my intuition, that if I just position myself through the framework of being me, I get to be happy.
And actually it radiates because honestly, talking with you, I mean, you feel happy when you're talking to you because you're just beaming it, and the conversation is an easy conversation and it's authentic. And I think that when we are true to ourselves, then other people feel comfortable. Because if we aren't comfortable,
I was just going to say that I think talking about this sort of ripple effect and this sort of causal, although maybe not obviously causal, sort of situations in our lives. You know, one of the things that I think is important in working with people around the idea of what we put out, what energy we're putting out, and like you said, yes, it radiates from you. And we've talked before, Carolyn and I, about how a lot of times it's really pretty easy to diagnose somebody who has an anxiety disorder. Maybe we need a little time to pinpoint exactly what the anxiety is, whether it's, you know, post-traumatic stress or it's, you know, social phobia or whatever, but that you can feel anxiety rolling off of someone when they're really suffering from anxiety, and you find yourself becoming tense in their presence.
Exactly.
And when you start feeling that, you're like, oh yeah, this person's got some anxiety going on, and that's true of positive and negative emotions, of course. You know, somebody who's frustrated, if they're walking around in that space, they're going to be passing that along to everyone that they interact with. And it's a lot of times I take it from a place of, you know, being very conscious about the language that we use, both with others and with ourselves, and how that affects dynamics as we go through our day. But I think, why would we not choose to be radiating this positive energy out to the world?
So, you know, our time has actually quickly come upon us, and I just, you know, wanted to say, tell us again how people can get in touch with you, and, you know, what you offer to people or group, individual. Can you say a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my website is nurturetheleader.com, and you may email me directly at jan@nurturetheleader.com. And the way I work with people is I do offer a kind of an entry-level program that is a 6-week kind of spiritual cleanse where we go to town just clearing the things out that are in the way of connecting with your happiness prism. And then I also take people on 6-month to year-long journeys with me in high-level private coaching experiences. And then I'm also in the process of putting together luxury sailing retreats to take people away to fully connect with their happiness prism in my happy place.
Yes, so you get to travel and
exactly.
to that's
Yes.
great. Well, Jan, we really do thank you for being on the show with us today. We're really excited. So every day we're going to practice play.
Yes.
We're going to practice peace, and we're going to practice progress. So
And ask firstly, who do I require to be happy?
who do I require to be?
And then
happy?
one action in
Okay.
each. That's
Great.
that's the quick tip of the
Okay.
day. That's the rest
Okay.
of the triangle. So
Okay.
thank you so much.
That's great. Thank you for being on the show.
Yeah.
We are so excited that you joined us today, and we want you to know that happiness is not that far away. Set the intention. Make a decision, make a choice that you want to be happy, and you can be. And we hope that you'll find what your life's purpose is as well. Thank you again for joining us, and we will see you next time on Sacred Intelligence TV. Bye-bye now.